Welcome to this explainer. So picture this. You're standing in a crowded room, watching everything unfold, and you know exactly who's lying and who's secretly in pain. If you've been there, you probably also know that sinking feeling of looking around and realizing, wait, am I the only one seeing this? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating psychological phenomenon based on the work of Carl Jung. It's all about the very real danger, and honestly the profound power, of seeing what other people just simply don't.
You know, there's a very specific kind of loneliness that just doesn't have a good mainstream name. We're not talking about the loneliness of sitting in an empty room or grieving a loss. It's what we might call the observer's curse. It's that bizarre isolation of standing right in the middle of a crowd, watching a social dynamic play out almost in slow motion, and realizing, wow, nobody else is seeing reality right now. You know exactly what's about to go wrong. You pick up on the deception. You can literally feel the hidden hurt behind someone's totally fake smile. Listen, if you experience this, I want to tell you right out of the gate, this is not a disorder. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you.
The legendary psychologist Carl Jung actually spent decades studying folks exactly like this. He gave it a name: differentiated perception. He believed it was one of the absolute most powerful but simultaneously dangerous gifts a human being could possibly have. Because you see, the true agony of this gift, it isn't the seeing itself, it's what happens after. When you gently try to point out the underlying truths you're noticing, society tends to push back, hard. People might label you as negative or difficult, or accuse you of just stirring the pot and creating problems out of thin air.
Think about it. How many times have you quietly sat there and watched a friend's relationship, or say, a totally chaotic workplace dynamic, like one of those pointless corporate meetings where everyone's just pretending to agree, knowing exactly how it was going to collapse months before it actually did? It is just utterly exhausting to carry that anticipatory grief, right? Seeing the crash before the car even hits the wall. Over time, a lot of people with this trait just become quiet and withdrawn. It feels like the world is a stage, and you're stuck watching from the wings, completely unable to pretend that you don't see the giant cracks in the set.
So why exactly does society punish you for this? Well, it boils down to something called managed blindness. To understand why your clarity makes people so mad, you kind of have to understand how groups actually work. Every healthy group, whether we're talking about your family dinner table or your corporate office, relies on a fake surface. There's this unspoken, collective agreement to just smooth things over, to let uncomfortable truths slide so that everyone can keep cooperating. The catch is, if you have differentiated perception, you literally can't automatically play along with that managed blindness. You instinctively spot the exact elephant in the room that everyone else silently agreed to ignore. And when people feel like they're being seen a little too clearly, it makes them deeply, deeply uncomfortable. And guess what explanation they usually land on for that discomfort? Yep, you. Jung called this reaction shadow projection. It's kind of like a mirror. When a group projects its unacknowledged flaws onto you, they are essentially looking in a mirror, seeing something they absolutely hate, and instead of taking a hard look at themselves, they just pick up a rock and throw it at the mirror. This is exactly why highly perceptive people are so constantly labeled as the dramatic one.
Now, this is an absolutely crucial point. We have to understand the difference between feeling and seeing. Society loves to slap the label highly sensitive on anybody who reacts strongly to their environment. But being highly sensitive just means feeling deeply. Differentiated perception, on the other hand, means seeing deeply. It's a pretty brutal distinction, honestly, because society can totally tolerate someone who just feels things. They'll just hand you a tissue. But society is genuinely terrified of someone who sees clearly, because clear sight threatens that whole managed blindness game everyone is relying on.
Just to put into perspective how rare this actually is, Jung estimated that while about 20% of the population is emotionally sensitive, true introverted intuitives, the folks with this highly specific psychological architecture, make up only about 1% of the population. 1%. So if you're experiencing this, you are dealing with a profoundly rare way of processing the world. You're literally a 1 in 100 kind of mind.
And you know, naming your exact experience is really the very first step to actually mastering it. Jung went a step further and categorized exactly how this trait shows up in different people. So I want you to ask yourself, which of these 4 psychological architectures do you actually relate to the most?
Okay, so Jung identified these 4 specific perceiver types. First up is the feeling perceiver. If this is you, you physically absorb the emotional pain and tension of the room. You probably end your day just totally wiped out by emotional contamination. Next, we have the thinking perceiver. For you, this looks like advanced pattern recognition. You can read a person's entire psychology in minutes and know exactly how a situation is going to end. Then there's the somatic perceiver. You actually register psychological data physically. Like, you might sense hidden illness or stress in a room, which leads to some intense physical overload. And finally, the pure intuitive. You get these incredibly powerful, dead-accurate impressions without any logical source. It honestly probably makes you feel like you're losing your mind sometimes, because you just can't explain how you know what you know.
Figuring out your type is super liberating, for sure. But, well, we have to talk about the risks. What actually happens if you don't learn to master this psychological gift? Jung was absolutely adamant that leaving this unmanaged is highly, highly destructive. There are 3 severe dangers if you just let this perception run wild without a conscious framework holding it together.
Let's look at the stakes here. Danger number 1 is chronic isolation. This is living with that grinding, everyday despair of feeling fundamentally untranslatable to everybody around you. Danger number 2 is identity erosion, or what Jung called participation mystique. This happens when you absorb so much unconscious junk from your environment that you literally lose your own identity. You can't even tell where you end and other people begin. But the third danger? That one's the most insidious. It's the prophet complex. When your perfectly accurate perception gets rejected over and over again, it's dangerously easy to become arrogant. You go from being this curious witness to a rigid, bitter judge, totally consumed by your own ego.
But don't worry, here is the profound hope in all of Jung's work. You do not have to be destroyed by this burden. The goal isn't to somehow turn it off, you can anyway, but to transform it into an extraordinary tool. Jung called this solution the path of integration, or individuation. Basically, it's the process of building a psychological structure inside yourself that's strong enough to hold what you see without letting it break you.
So, let's walk through Jung's 4 practical stages to clean that perceptual lens of yours. Stage 1 is recognition through solitude. You have got to spend time in genuine quiet so all that absorbed noise from the world can finally settle and you can hear your own authentic voice again. Stage 2 is shadow work. You just can't have clean perception until you acknowledge your own darkness. Usually, the stuff you intensely judge in others are actually unacknowledged parts of yourself. Stage 3 is conscious participation. This is where you build internal containers to become a witness rather than the sponge. You learn to dial your openness up or down, because let's be real, not every room deserves your fullest awareness. And stage 4 is service without sacrifice. This is when your perception becomes an intentional offering, like you become the friend who asked the exact right question over coffee, instead of it just being a source of your own suffering.
Now, to actually survive this journey, your environment matters just as much as the internal work. You must find your people. You're looking for those rare individuals who don't force you to perform that ordinary fake awareness. Look for fellow individuated folks who aren't threatened when you see them clearly. Or keep an eye out for natural containers. These are people who have this grounded, calm solidity to them. They can hold complex truths without getting rattled or defensive. Honestly, these relationships are going to be your absolute lifeline.
If you have spent your entire life feeling like you're just too intense, Jung offered this incredibly vital piece of validation. You are not broken. You are a consciousness pioneer. You're carrying the vital, unseen tensions of your culture, or maybe your family, long before the collective can even see them. Remember, you aren't creating the tension. You're just the very first one to register it.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for today. See wisely, live fully. You've got to stop trying to fix systems that punish you for your awareness. The work in front of you isn't to lower your frequency to match the unconscious people around you. Not at all. It's to become equal to the weight of what you carry. So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Will you keep letting society's managed blindness make you feel crazy, or are you going to do the work of integration, clean your lens, and finally step into the untouchable power of seeing the world exactly as it is?